All right, everyone. Hello. Welcome to the fourth live show that I decided to put on. And today, what I really wanted to discuss was video games and all of their different glories that we have. I want to tell a little bit of a story. So strap in. It was Easter. I'm going to say I was either 3 or 4 years old. I can't remember exactly. And I know this is weird because I think my family is the only family who did this. Just talking with people as I've been growing up, we got Easter presents. Let me tell you how weird this is. So what we were supposed to do on Easter Eve, not that we called it that, but the day before Easter, we actually had to set out a piece of our clothing, whether it was a shirt or a pair of pants or whatever it happened to be, somewhere around the house. And then when we woke up in the morning, it would have been made into like a little nest, like a rabbit's nest with like chocolates and stuff like that, with presents that we got. We got clothing and usually a new video game would arrive that day. But that was years later, because when I was 3 or 4, we got this huge present, me and my brother, because my sister had not been born yet, of the Sega Master System. And this was a huge deal to me at the time because we didn't have a video game system in the house at that point. And then all of a sudden we had the game that I'm going to totally blank on the name now, but you got to shoot things with an actual rifle. It wasn't Duck Hunt because that was on the Nintendo system, but we also got Wonder Boy, which has stayed with me for a long time. Is one of my very favorite video game series and went off into a very weird direction. I'm rambling a little bit, but what I wanted to say is that joy of getting that Sega Master System was such a joy to me, and that stayed with me for the rest of my life. Now, unfortunately, or maybe somewhat not unfortunately for my bank account, is that I have really fallen out of the video game sphere for about the last 6 years or so, but I've now slowly been building that up. I do have every single video game system out in that living room that I have, most because my roommate has the Xbox One and the PS4. I have a Wii U because that's the video game choice I decided on. And I still get great joy from it. I think there's great art being made out of it. But I'm kind of slowly bringing myself back into the fore after having been out of it for so many years. So to help me discuss that a little bit more is the special guest that I have here today, Marcus Freeman. There you are.
Hey, everybody.
So, by the way, just to introduce the show, today is November 22nd, 2014. This is Alive with Kyle and a guest. This is Mark, and we're going to talk about a few different things here. To start off with, I kind of ask this to everyone when we begin these sorts of things. What's your deal?
My deal.
Yeah, what do you do? What do you like to do?
I like to relax.
Okay.
I also really like video games.
Nice.
Which I think won me a ticket on the show.
Yes, that's right.
I like media of all kinds, I think, and just technology as a whole. And
what is it about video games specifically? Like my story here, everything with like the Sega Master System at 3 years old. What is your earliest memory of seeing video games?
I always lived with a little bit of jealousy going out to other people's houses before I got my own. But I remember my brother and I have the same kind of idea, going to Kmart, maybe.
Could be.
Shows you the time frame on this one, and picking up the Super Nintendo that came with an extra controller and Donkey Kong Country.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And that was it. That was the best. And then I think just growing up in it.
What time frame are we talking about there? That would be what, early 90s, I guess?
No, late 90s, I think. Super Nintendo came out.
Oh, no, Super Nintendo was the early 90s because 98 was Nintendo 64. I'm pretty sure, or 97 maybe for Nintendo 64.
I just play the games, man.
It's whatever. Gamer for life. I just play it. It's my blood, man.
But what do I love about it? I think it has a lot of things wrapped up in it. Story, the idea of puzzle, using your brain.
Yeah.
Like in my household, it's always like what you use your time for, and I think it's a very. This is controversial maybe, but like I think it's a really good use of your time, because you can read a book and have it presented to you and you just follow the page and do what it will. But I think that video games comes from a lot of different areas, and so you're being presented a story, but you got to like work for it, and you got to like figure out how to get there, and like get there in the way that you think.
Well, let's delve into that a little bit more, because video games, and maybe video games, I guess, because it's called that, because it's called a game, I think that is why a lot of people think that there's really no, I guess, utility for them, instead of thinking of them as, I'm going to do like a very like pretentious name here, which is like interactive media type stuff, where you get to like control the story, and you get to control, I guess, what you're looking at for some of it at least. What because I think as kids you don't necessarily think about that, but I'm having fun playing this game, shooting like turtle shells at people and stuff like that. When do you think you switched over from being like, I like doing this stuff, to be like, oh, I think that there's actually a deeper level to this?
I think I always wanted to, even when I just liked it.
Sure.
I wanted maybe some validation.
What does the Princess in Another Castle truly represent?
What does that mean to me?
Yeah.
I think probably like coming of age and like trying to think of like an occupation to do, and definitely getting involved in art on my own. Seeing those come together and seeing like my inspiration from video games being brought out in another medium, in illustration or in animation or whatever that looks like. I think that kind of blew it outside of the cartridge, so to speak, to become something else, and then going on. And then I think just like as the video game industry has grown up on its own, seeing how people take it and really appreciating the different, like you've got your AAA games that are like beautiful and sometimes done, and then you have others that are like somebody made this in their basement, and like in some ways it has something that a AAA game couldn't have, and all those kinds of things, and just seeing different people's perspectives on it.
I'm going to jump all over the place here, because something you just said caused me to reflect on something. And one thing I really noticed with, like you said, the AAA games, there has been some blowback here with some of our of those titles. Specifically, I'm thinking of there was like the Master Chief Collection that came out last week, and then there was not the Call of Duty, maybe it was Call of Duty. Anyways, there was these games that came out that were like buggy, that were causing
Assassin's Creed.
Thank you, Assassin's Creed. They were glitchy, that weren't seeming to actually be a finished game that people could actually play. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that. I mean, I guess there's the pros and cons with, which is, hey, we can fix this if we need to. But back on, say, cartridge days, you would get glitches every now and then, but it was still a finished game for the most part when you got that home.
I think from the perspective of, let's say, computers, the same idea that like you can have somebody who'd be like, this took 5 seconds and I don't appreciate that. Like I think in this day and age with the growth of technology and our expectations have gone up a lot. So like you would get a bug in like a cartridge game and be like, cool, like what was that? Whereas today you're like, this is outrageous, like this can't happen.
This needs to be perfect.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's fair. You pay a lot more money for things like that. But like I have Assassin's Creed and I really like it. And there is a couple of bugs in it, but I think it's kind of like, what do you take from that? If you are unwilling to play an imperfect thing, then don't touch it. But I think that as technology's grown and as the following has grown, like I think of like SimCity's another really good example of that. The new SimCity that came out, that like I played the beta and it was great, and then when the game actually came out and millions of people started playing it, like the servers just aren't there and all that kind of stuff. And so the infrastructure is not in place, and that's why these kind of things fail. So I don't know. I think it's a shame sometimes when stuff falls down, but I think it's part of the like growing process, and you can either choose to hate it or you can choose to kind of like be like, well, this is where we are right now, and go with it.
Do you think I don't know, like do you think that people are they crave perfection? I guess they expect perfection, and then when they don't get it, they I guess retaliate to it.
I think people like to complain.
That's true.
I think that's a base human quality. I think there's something to be said of like, I just spent $70 and the thing that I was promised is not doing what it said it would.
I guess there's a difference between is there a glitch, but is it still playable versus is this a broken game? Like you cannot progress any further, which I would be very upset by if I paid $65. Like I cannot go past the first level because of a glitch that is in this game. Right?
I think like comparing like Assassin's Creed that came out this week and like SimCity, where like you needed the servers to play, and that's the way they designed the game, which is kind of like maybe not the best idea. So people actually weren't getting to play their game. Whereas Assassin's Creed like is a little bit more of like slow frame rates, or like I think there's a pretty big divide. So I think if you couldn't get any experience out of it, you can be angry about that. But I'm always one for like, I'm pretty big on forgiveness. And I think if like Ubisoft or whoever makes the game like comes through and is like, all right, we're working on this as best as we can. Kind of like, all right, I forget.
I'm gonna trust you.
Yeah.
What games did you like the most when you were a kid? Like, what did you?
I grew up on Nintendo.
Yeah. I think most people, well, of our age, I'm going to say, I'm going to lump you into me being really old, but I think we've all grew up on that Nintendo type of mentality.
Yeah. Yeah, Nintendo and Super Nintendo. Chip and Dale Adventure. So
I've
hard,
not heard that game
fun.
reference for so long, but okay, yes.
And
the DuckTales game too, did you play that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Infuriating. And then Super Nintendo, I like worked my way through that. I was a pretty big Nintendo guy, pretty much all the way through. I'm trying to think of like specific titles. Spectre.
I don't know if I know that one.
It's like a tank game that I got for Christmas one year.
Yeah.
That was a bit of a disaster, but played the crap out of it because that's what I had.
Sure.
Arrow the Acrobat.
Oh, I don't know that one either.
What else? And then Nintendo 64.
Yeah.
Jumped into that pretty hard. Wasn't big on the Mario.
Okay.
But love Zelda.
Yeah.
Can't not love Zelda.
As you can tell with my figurine that's up there. Yeah.
And then GameCube.
Okay. What else in the GameCube? Yeah.
Then I started dabbling. I think when PS3 came out. Then I guess I got a Wii, and then I got a PS3, and kind of like moved over to the dark side, and now I'm a PS4 guy.
To the dark. Well, where do you fall with that? I guess do you buy into the rivalry, I guess, quote unquote, between Microsoft and Sony?
I have to confess that I was happy when the Xbox One and PS4 were both announced.
Okay.
Because Microsoft just like handed it to Sony.
Right.
But on the flip side, like whatever, if people like it, I'm not gonna like give. I think maybe to the company I'll be like, but
sure.
I think to people, like if you have an Xbox, I'm not gonna be like, Kyle, like,
how dare you?
You're not a very good person.
Yeah. Obviously, you don't like games then.
So I do have an opinion, but I try not to be too much of a hater.
Right.
Either way.
Well, what do you go to nowadays? Like, what are your go-to games that you like to play? Apparently, you're a PlayStation person, so you must like some of their titles.
Yeah, and I think like my take on it, I'm pretty like logical when I make my decisions or try to be. So I think like console specific games.
Yeah. And
I think Sony, at least I like a lot more Sony games that aren't on Xbox because a lot of games are going to come cross console anyways. So I think that, and now just like a hardware thing, like so when a new game's announced, usually it's like on Xbox it's 900p and 30 frames per second, and then usually PS4 is 1080 and 60, which maybe I'm just like numbers, but
well, there is going to become a point. I mean, you're getting that in film a little bit here now too, where they're kind of testing the waters with 48 frames per second. And I know that James Cameron is going to be filming the next 3 Avatar films in 60 frames per second. Or no, 120 frames per second, something ridiculous. What? Anyways, some reduced high frame rate that he's going to be testing out with. But apparently the human eye can't distinguish past like 80 or something like that. So it's kind of overkill in some ways, but whatever, I guess. I think there's going to come a time, though, maybe not this iteration of consoles, but definitely the next one or maybe the one after, where they're going to reach somewhat parity, where you're going to be like, they're basically the same, but this has this unique game that I can't do over on this one. So I have to go with that.
Yeah, I think last generation was a lot more like on the same level.
Yeah.
But I think this generation, Microsoft just made a lot of weird choices.
Sure.
And that was another like decision for me, that like from the day they announced the Xbox One to the day like to today, like I would say 90% of the things they were like this and this and this are not things anymore, because like either they were really bad decisions or were one up.
They disconnected the Kinect and stuff like that too. Right? What do you know who Victor Lucas is?
No.
Okay, so there is this thing called Electric Playground that happens here in Canada. And I think it's shown down in the US too, if I'm not mistaken, on a few different channels. But Victor Lucas created that like 20 years ago now, which is crazy to me that people were talking about video games 20 years ago on television. But his opinion is that he doesn't really like, I guess, console exclusives necessarily. Like he understands like people wanting to sell their own consoles and stuff like that, but he doesn't like that barrier of entry. So like if you get a next gen console, why not have all of those games available to you? I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
I don't know. I like the idea that you kind of have a camp you can live in.
Right.
And it sounds a little bit like Monopoly to me, like
Sure.
everybody gets one and then they can have access to all kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Whereas I like the idea that like, well, I play Sony, so like that's my thing. And it might backfire to like a consumer society that says like, well, I want that game, so I'm gonna buy that console kind of thing. And
Sure.
It could end up people just spending way too much money, but I like the idea that like there's some games that I'm probably not going to play, and I'm fine with that kind of thing. And but it makes me appreciate the games that I do have.
Right. What is your opinion of Nintendo right now? Because I know there seems to be, I'm going to say a schism happening right now, which is like there's a lot of hate towards Nintendo and their decisions, and then there's obviously the people who love that company and are continuing to support them. But I don't know, where do you see them in this video game space now?
I read a really interesting article on Polygon yesterday. Yeah. Did you see that?
I haven't read it yet. No.
Oh, okay. I must confess I didn't read the whole thing.
Right. I just read the headline. It was a fantastic article.
Yeah, about Walt Disney potentially buying Nintendo, which about that whole. I mean, they making all these purchases they are, and
like they talk about Monopoly right now.
That's
like they
true.
have basically all of my childhood has been bought by Disney at this point.
But yeah, Marvel and now Star Wars, and I mean
the Muppets.
Oh yeah, good call. I didn't think about that. And in some ways, I think that would be a really good thing. I think that I don't know.
That being said, too, I mean, I read an article, this was probably like a year ago now, but talking about how Nintendo is in such a good place financially that it could post non-profits for like the next 30 years or something like that before they ran out of money.
Totally. Yeah.
They did such a good job in the 80s of like generating, and 90s generating a revenue stream, and then didn't blow that away on other stuff.
Yeah, I think they're sitting on like $16 billion or something silly.
They started off as a card trading company, like in like the late 1800s or something like that. Like they've been around for a long, long time.
Yeah. So in some ways, like I think they certainly deserve my respect. I think I won't ever like bad talk them. I think that they need to figure out a way to keep being inventive and keep being themselves, but find a way to kind of like mainstream at the same time. Right. I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, it's so hard because I do feel, again, there seems to be these different camps. I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I mean, there's, just using the analogy of film again, there's people who like comedy, there's people who like action films, there's people who like science fiction, and there's people who don't. And I think for me at least, coming back into it, what I really respect about Nintendo specifically is that they have a very unique outlook and they stick to it.
Totally.
And they're also the ones who are not afraid, unlike some of the other companies, to like push the title back. It's like, nope, it's not ready. We're gonna push this back a couple more months.
That's true.
But you kind of know what you're going to get when you play a Nintendo game. It's going to be usually very well designed. It's going to challenge you. It's going to be all that other stuff. But there is that like kid effect that you get with it.
Yeah.
Whether that's because we're coming from our childhood, or because they do look like very kiddie representations there up on the screen. But I guess I kind of think of them almost as that Pixar, which is like they're creating these animated films, but it's their own type of animated films. They're not really caring so much if this is just a kid's movie or an adult movie. It's kind of both.
Yeah, I like that about them. I think that them as like a business model right now, like if you take Sony and Xbox right now, you have their like the games that they make themselves, and then you have all these shared titles.
Right.
And I kind of feel like Nintendo's kind of like down here and may get a couple of the shared titles, but like their revenue is not bolstered by.
Yeah, it's their own stuff. Well, and that's apparently what really hurt the perception of the Wii by the end of its life cycle, which was that they had all the Wii exclusives. Some fantastic games in there. The non-Wii exclusives, like terrible. Some of them, like just junky games that didn't really even deserve to be on.
Or
that
like
console.
twisted baby brothers of games that had come out.
Yeah,
like they would try and make it and like Wii-ize it or whatever, and it was just it was not good.
Yeah. Where do you think it's going to go? Where do you think the future of video games is? Do you think Oculus Rift is going to be the next big thing?
It's definitely coming up. I don't know. Personally, I don't know if I want to sit in my living room with headphones and like essentially like sensory deprivation.
Sure.
I mean, it's the same idea with 3D. That like 3D definitely had like I love going to the theater and watching something in 3D.
Right.
But I don't have a 3D TV, and I don't really know if I want a 3D TV.
Sure.
Like I don't want to sit in my house with glasses on
that
I don't have to wear. I think it might be. It's a hard call because Sony's doing it too with Project Morpheus.
Right. Yeah.
Which I think could be really neat. It may be kind of like a niche market. It may turn into a Virtual Boy. Like it might just be like another like this is a crazy idea. and it just kind of like
it's crazy
like,
how Nintendo tried to do that so long ago in such a bad implementation of it, and now that's coming back to be like the big thing is virtual reality. Yeah, it's always so hard. I read there's a documentary I was watching about how humanity is really bad at predicting anything more than like 2 years from now about what's going to happen. That's why you have in the 60s, we're going to have flying cars by the year 2000.
No problem.
No, that's not going to happen. Everything's going to come in pill form. It's like, that did not happen.
I have grown quite a fondness for Nikola Tesla.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And just like who he was and like the stuff he did. And it's crazy to think about the world where Tesla was Franklin.
Yeah.
Wait,
Edison, you mean?
Edison, sorry. Yeah. Because all the things that he had and figured out and like died with him kind of thing.
Right.
And I wonder just where that went. But I don't know. It is really hard to tell. And it's really hard because people are so fickle, I think, that like you can give this something and it could be great, but if it's not the time for it, it'll be terrible.
Right.
So, I mean, I think people will buy into it, whether it will go much further or where it's going to go. I don't like this whole like Amiibo Disney 2.0 thing.
Yeah.
It just seems like a money grab.
Well, it is a little bit, but I do like the concept of being able to level a character through multiple games. I think that is kind of a neat concept.
But to buy more crap?
True enough. I agree with that. It was just like, I'm going to have dusty shells because of all this stuff that I have up on it. But yeah. What about, there's a podcast I listened to called DLC, and they were discussing the impact of Minecraft specifically and how that's going to influence games going forward. Because right now it is a very big industry. Microsoft just bought them for like a few $1 billion, however much it was that they bought them for.
Yeah.
So they definitely see that that's hopefully going to be a return on investment somehow. What one of the hosts was saying though is what he feels because of his younger nephew that he can see playing this game is that Minecraft is very much going to be this young generation's Super Mario Brothers, where that is just how they think a video game is, where I can go in, I can just start creating, I can make something from this, and how that is going to completely change what we're about to see. So yeah, like understanding how something like that has that butterfly effect throughout the entire industry, because I think we are still at this point referencing back to that Super Mario Brothers world that we still live in. It's like, how can I make this but do something more, type of thing.
I think that, I mean, I think of like, the Raspberry Pi, like the little computers, they like come with like a copy of Minecraft, just like for like the basis idea. But like that coding is like one of the subjects in like, I think Europe it's pretty big. I don't know if it's big here yet, but that like kids learn to read and write and do math and code. And I think that that's really going to change things for the better.
Understanding code is probably going to be big. I think that's going to push book technology and I guess humanity in some ways probably further. I don't know how to code. I don't know how to do that. I'm going to be, well, if I ever have the opportunity to have grandchildren, let alone children, I guess. But it's just be one of those things that's like, when my day, I didn't have to know how to code.
Our characters just read one direction.
Yeah, that's right. My granddad's so stupid and racist. Yeah, I don't know. Going back, I kind of asked you a similar question, but coming at it from a different angle. What are your favorite video games? Like if you had to right now on the spot try and come up with like your top 5 or your top 3.
Shoot. There's a lot of factors. Like you said earlier, like your movie experience can very much be like affected by like the theater you sat in and you sat around.
That's right.
So there's a lot of like the memories that I do have. Secret of Mana, I'm gonna say.
Yeah.
I am a sucker for new, and I just like the new thing, even if it's not very good yet.
Sure. Okay.
Oh, that's such a hard one. The Lion King Super Nintendo game.
Really? All right.
This is embarrassing.
We're trying to think of the top 5 video games of all time, and yes, The Lion King Super Nintendo version is on that list.
Ocarina of Time.
Oh yeah.
Shouldn't have got me that long. Taking that long to get there.
I know you said you started PS3. Did you ever do any PS2 games?
I never owned it, so I never really had them on my own, but I definitely like played quite a few of them. Okay, another embarrassing one. There was a Hercules PS2 game.
Okay. Like based on the Disney Hercules?
I don't know. It was
Okay.
It was its
Just
own
Hercules,
kind of
okay.
like thing, and you could play as different characters. But they had it at the Sport Check in Micmac Mall in Dartmouth. And so anytime I went to the mall with my mom,
Alright.
I'd be like, "Peace, mom, see ya," and I'd go to Sport Check and play this game.
I will say that is one thing I kind of miss. I mean, it's kind of like phone booths now, where you just don't see them anywhere,
Yeah.
unless you're in LA for whatever reason. I see them like all over the place. Like, why? But it's just not consoles, but arcade games.
Mhm.
When growing up in a small town, Rocky Mountain House, Alberta, there was the Shell gas station. Well, sorry, there was the A&W with the Shell gas station,
Yeah.
and in the Shell gas station there was always two arcade things set up, and they switch them out every few months or so. But I remember playing like so much stuff
Totally.
on there. Rampage, like the big monsters, like smashing things up, and Golden Axe and stuff like that.
Totally.
And you don't really have that experience anymore.
The Mortal Kombat 2 arcade edition.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and I'm sure if I played it now, I'd be like, this sucks. Like, there was a time and place that like those things are just beyond. I don't know. They just have such good memories.
Shadow of the Colossus for PS2.
Oh, okay.
It's so good. That's probably in my top 5, but I have to think about it. I just very recently this summer sat down and tried to think of like my top 5 movies of all time, and it was like a process. I was like, no, this goes about this. Man, I don't know, maybe. And then I forgot once, like, oh, I forget that one. And then
this throws everything off.
I
live with a guy, a good friend of mine, and he rated everything in his life. Like if you asked him anything, he would have his like top 5 or top 10 of like. It was like living with high fidelity.
Yeah. Top 5 colors of white is off-white, eggshell white. I'd be remiss just based on the title of this episode, and I know that we were discussing this beforehand, where you don't know much about it, but that's okay. Gamergate, which has been kind of running rampant in the community a little bit, which started off in one way, has gone up in another way. Really, at this point, whether or not it is about ethics in journalism, if that's how they want to frame it as how it started, really at this point is now, do females have a place in the video game industry? And I think you and I are pretty much aligned, and yes, that is. I don't think that's even, I feel that's a stupid question to even ask, but I guess what's your opinion on different voices coming into the video game industry? Because I would say, just like Western culture is, everything is predominantly white male oriented. So how do you feel about different cultures and different types of games being brought out to us?
I think it's a silly conversation to have in the first place. I think that I think if you brought it up in the same as like art, like to be like, you know what? No more art from girls. Like,
I'm sick of this.
Yeah, it's too fluffy, and well, that's probably a sexist thing to say, anyways. But I think
it's just this girl with one unibrow and stuff like that. I don't get it.
I think it's just such a silly thing to talk about, and I think it's pretty like, if it is guys behind it, I think it's rude, and I think it's just kind of like a silly like, no, we don't want anyone else to have input on this. We want it to be ours. Like some of the best parts of any kind of like art style are like when somebody brings something fresh or from like a new perspective. There was a game that just came out. It's on the Humble Bundle right now called, I have no idea what it's called, but it was made by like an Indian, like a Native American development company. And it's about an Eskimo kid, and like he's got his little wolf out of the wild or something like that. I think that's so cool. I think it's so neat to see things from different perspectives, because they're going to take like the framework and they're going to make it their own, and they're going to tell their story. And I think that that's a huge part of what video games are. I think that as much as it is about sitting with a controller in your living room and doing nothing and like wasting time, sometimes
being able to have you interact with that culture on a more intimate level,
and have them be able to like tell their story in like a medium that's interactive, really.
I will say that and this is just my sensibilities about not only video games but probably movies and TV and stuff as well. I'm usually not the biggest fan of, say, like the biggest properties. There's gonna be some exceptions to that because I'm a big Halo freak. But I mean, I really like that unique, smaller type stuff, like Journey, that was like from a couple years ago, which is like a really unique, neat experience, in Flower and Limbo and all those types of games that are just like, it's a very insular experience, but man, it's just like, this is a very cool piece of art that I get to experience.
Well, Shadow of the Colossus is a great example, and I think like a pioneer of that it was like a very traditional like gameplay style, but like so artistic and so just kind of like telling a very different story.
I remember the first time going between one Colossus and I was like, there's no enemies to fight. Like what?
Totally.
Like I could just ride my horse home forever if I wanted to. And probably people did. It's like just run around with their horses, did stuff.
It was just such an experience, and I think that like really takes it to the next level. That like reading a book on your couch is like you can really be taken to like a different place. But I don't know, I just think that it really like engages a lot more of you. I always think of, I argue with my wife about this all the time, but I think of like those brain color things of like what parts of your brain you're using.
Right.
And I argue that like I think that it uses so much more of your brain, that like you're creatively engaged, but you're also like problem solving and like
that's why I like Zelda so much, because it's like that like swashbuckling like adventure type story, but then I get to the temples and I'm like, oh gosh, how did I get this lever pulled? Like trying to figure it out and stuff like that. Okay, well, we've been talking for almost half an hour. So I have the 4 most important questions of the day here in my right hand. So number 1, toadstool or peach? Do you know about this debate? So she used to be called Princess Toadstool back in the original games, but now they call her Princess Peach, and I have no idea why they changed it.
If I may, with no educated anything on this, I think that she now is way more of a character, and they gave her a name.
Yeah, probably because there's a Toadstool Kingdom. And like,
and so you had to say
we should probably give this shit a name. I'm just gonna say,
rather than a position.
Yeah.
But I'm
it's kind of like I guess it's kind of like Mario, because he started off as a jump man. So I mean, it's just like
give the guy a name.
Who'd win in a fight? I think I'm gonna know your answer. Who'd win in a fight? Xbox One or PS4?
PS4.
Okay.
In every way. Sorry.
If you could live in any 16-bit world, what would it be?
They're all so dangerous.
They're all so dangerous. There's things flying at me and stuff like that.
Spiky everything.
I can't walk anywhere. I can only walk in a straight line. I can't go sideways.
What 16-bit world?
So basically, what Super Nintendo game do you want to live in?
Yeah. I think it'd be cool to live in like Marble Hill, Sonic's.
Yeah.
Although you'd have to climb on big loops and stuff, but there's cute animals everywhere. Yeah. There are some spikes, but
just avoid Dr. Robotnik.
Yeah. And there'll be rings everywhere.
Everywhere. You'll be so rich. Last question. And this has nothing to do with any of the previous questions. Okay. All right. So just why? This is finally your psychology question, philosophy question.
Can this be in relation to what we're talking about?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Because I think it's relevant, because I think it's controversial, because I think there are a lot of misinterpretations, and I think there's a lot of like, I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do it.
All right.
And I think that trying to figure out the right way to do it. I think trying to live life and keep other things going in your life, because it can be very enrapturing and very like, well, what's the point of going outside when I could stay in here and experience the whole everything?
Sure.
Trying to find that balance and like battling through that, but enjoying what I really like and feeling the freedom to like what I like and not be judged by it, and to find a way to let it be something that is on equal footing to other things in its good and in its bad.
I mean, it's very well said. Thank you for coming and joining me here today, sitting down. If you like video games, let me know what your favorite one is down in the comments below. I think that's one way to fill up the comment section. But yeah, just go out, play some good games, and don't be dicks. That's really the most important thing about here. All right, we're going to stop transmission. Bye.